We are live with two guests who I am always pleased to bring to the viewers of Crowdsource the truth. Of course, today we've got Laura Loomer and Larry Klayman joining me to discuss what is one of the hottest topics in the mainstream and outside of the mainstream. We've got this freshman class in Congress that is just going absolutely haywire. Larry, Laura, can you guys both hear me?
Yes.
We can, Jason. Great to see you. Laura, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Glad to hear you're well.
Me too.
I'm glad to have both of you guys with me. Laura's joining us from a telephone-only connection today, but that's fine. Laura, you've been challenging Ilhan Omar and some of the, let's call them what they are, jihadi congressional representatives since they came on the scene. What's your take on this latest situation that's been going on with Ilhan Omar?
Whoa, wow. Did you just really call them jihadi? Have I officially convinced you that these women are jihadis?
Well, I think it's worth spending some time reminding people that Laura was the one who first told me about the explanatory memorandum. Give us a little background on that again, Laura, because it's difficult to believe.
Right. Yeah, so thanks, of course, for having me on again tonight. It's always fun. Well, okay, so this isn't a surprise to people who have been studying Islamic Jihad and the Islamic invasion in America like I have. What's currently happening in our country with these jihadi congresswomen, Ilhan Omar out of Minnesota and Rashida Tlaib out of Michigan. Shortly after 9/11 in 2004, during an FBI raid in Annandale, Virginia, well, the police, they spotted this Islamic couple taking pictures of a bridge in Virginia. And, well, it sparked their interest. And it turns out that, these jihadi individuals in Virginia were planning to destroy this structure in Virginia, this bridge, in another 9/11 style attack. And when they conducted a raid in Annandale, Virginia, in the home of a senior Muslim Brotherhood official, they discovered this document called the Explanatory Memorandum, which is essentially a blueprint for the Muslim Brotherhood in America, which is CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and many others, individuals who support Hamas, and their goal to infiltrate our political, educational, social institutions from every level, to implement Sharia at the highest levels and to essentially establish an Islamic caliphate in America. And if you look at the explanatory memorandum, which we did on your show several times, and we went through it word by word, you see that they talk about implementing Sharia and an Islamic caliphate in America, since they've determined that North America is the most ideal place to do this, through a process of what they call civilization jihad. Well, civilization jihad, right? You conquer civilization, and we know what jihad is. Jihad is defined in Islamic text as warfare against non-Muslims. So everybody who refuses to convert or submit to Islam. And the process of civilization jihad is done through settlement. Well, what is settlement? Settlement is Islamic immigration. Hajj, right? And so you see these individuals in the Democrat Party advocating for open borders, right? Advocating for mass Islamic immigration. And you look at people like Ilhan Omar herself, who is a Muslim immigrant from Somalia, and it all starts to make sense, right? It's not a surprise that when we have these jihadist candidates who hate Jews in Congress, that they're also calling for the eradication of ICE and DHS, and Ilhan recently said she wants all of DHS to be completely defunded. This is why, right? Because you have the Muslims in Congress now, and the next step to implementing Sharia and establishing the caliphate is open borders, so that all of these jihadist individuals can come in and take over. And this is an FBI document that was officially obtained. It has an FBI stamp on it. And the American public, they don't know about this. Last time we discussed this on your show, people were freaking out and going crazy because this is stuff the mainstream media has a responsibility to talk to people about, but unfortunately, they don't. And currently, the strongest chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood in America is CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is now backing Ilhan right? They and their thugs patrolled the hallways of Congress this week with Linda Sarsour to pressure people into supporting Ilhan and her Jew hatred. And they are now leading an initiative to get Judge Jeanine Pirro fired from Fox News for speaking truth about Sharia.
Right. Now, Larry, let's talk for a minute about the real violations of law that have been alleged against Ilhan Omar. Obviously, we can argue on one side or the other if her comments are anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish or whatever, but there is an ongoing question as to the legality of what she's done, marrying her brother, violation of immigration law. What's the status there?
Yeah, actually, before I do that, Jason, let me just amplify a little bit with Laura. And it's
Sure.
not just that people like Ilhan Omar and Tlaib are against Jews. They're also against Christians. That needs to be understood. And they're a close second to Jews in terms of who they hate, essentially. Because Laura's right. I mean, their goal is jihad. Their goal is to take over the world for Islam. That's what Allah teaches. Allah teaches, if you look in the Quran, that it's okay to lie to further the purpose of Allah. That's not in dispute. And what is also not in dispute, and it was an article written by Thomas Friedman, who is a self-hating Jewish leftist on the New York Times earlier this week, where even he wrote that it was Jewish groups, leftist Jewish groups in the district in Minnesota that supported the election of Ilhan Omar, and in fact donated a lot of money to her. So it's not just radical Muslims, but it's radical Jewish left, which has put this person in power and other people in power. And it was just stupidity on their part. I've often said that, if this was World War II all over again, the Jewish left would get on boxcars thinking they were going to summer camp. And it's not funny. And they tend to support the Palestinian cause before they support their own Jewish state in Israel. So it's small sides. And you've got the Anti-Defamation League that supports these kinds of people. You've got the ACLU, which has a significant contingent of the Jewish left. And as you know, I'm a Jew, I'm Messianic, I'm both. I'm a Jewish Christian in effect. But I feel so strongly about my Jewish heritage that I've started this group, and I hope people will join it, called the Coalition of the Jewish Right. I'm going to change the name a little bit, Coalition of the Jewish and Christian Right, because, hey, it's we Jews today who are on the front lines, but it's Christians tomorrow that are going to be subject to this in even a greater extent. Now let's talk about the complaint that we filed, and I sent it to the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary of Housing of Homeland Security. I'm not talking about Ben Carson, although we should send it to him too. I'm sure he'd be sympathetic. Kirstjen Nielsen. And I said, I want to meet with you, Secretary Nielsen, because this is a serious matter.
Yeah.
And it alleges that Ilhan Omar married her brother to commit immigration fraud to get her brother citizenship in this country, that she cavorts around with terrorists and terrorist groups, and Laura just confirmed that is true. CARE, by the way, is a segment of the Muslim Brotherhood. That's the granddaddy of terrorist organizations. Al-Qaeda is a subpart of that. And it was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in a case against the Holy Land Foundation in Dallas, Texas, a number of years ago by the Justice Department. And our politicians shy away from dealing with this because they don't want to be called racists. And that's why even on places like Fox News, you can't even use the word Muslim. You can't call Ilhan Omar a Muslim, let alone that she may be sympathetic to Sharia law, which is what Jeanine Pirro was reprimanded by Fox for. So we have to start talking the truth here, and this is a threat. Laura's right, there's an infiltration. And this illegality, there are two, apparently it was reported just in the last few days, that two ICE officers, immigration officers of the Department of Homeland Security, were doing their investigation of Ilhan Omar on her websites, on her internet sites, and found troubling information. And now they're being criticized for simply doing their job. It appears they may be reacting to the complaint that I filed, although I need confirmation that it's been formally instituted. It's going to take a lot of pressure on the Secretary of Homeland Security to do something here because of the fact that in today's world, if you're Muslim, you're essentially above the law because nobody wants to risk being called a racist.
You know, guys, just the other day, The Hill has an article here that says ICE investigating agents for sharing social media posts promoting conspiracy theories about Omar. And this article is talking about 2 immigration and custom enforcement agents who are reportedly under review for sharing social media posts promoting a conspiracy theory. Anytime something is called a conspiracy theory, that means they want you to think it's fake. ABC News reported that a senior Homeland Security agent shared a LinkedIn post with a video claiming Omar attended terrorism classes. Laura, you've done a lot of on-the-ground investigating in Minnesota and elsewhere with regard to Ilhan Omar. What have you learned in your first-hand investigation?
Well, none of this is a conspiracy theory. This is all fact-based information that is backed up by social media posts, marriage certificates, and Ilhan's own words and her own beliefs as a Muslim. And for some reason, you're just like Larry said, you're not allowed to speak truth about Muslims or Islam in America anymore. These people have become the most protected class of people in this country and around the world. And it's shocking to me because, you know, you can see the marriage certificate. She was married to a man in 2002, and then the other man, who's believed to be her brother, in 2009. She was married to 2 men at the same time. That's called bigamy, right? That is not legal in the United States of America. Incest is illegal in the United States of America. Her social media post, she has called Israel evil. She wrote a letter to a judge asking for men who were accused of joining ISIS overseas to receive a lenient sentencing, okay? She refused to condemn Hamas. She has referred to people like Elliot Abrams as as evil individuals and used anti-Semitic slurs to describe Jewish individuals in positions of power in our country, okay? The other day, she said that President Trump is not human, but Obama is. And, you know, I can't help but interpret that as her viewing Jews and Christians as subhuman, just like it says in the Quran. Because, you know, let's not forget, Barack Hussein Obama is a Muslim. Okay, and even in his own interviews, President Obama referred to himself as a Muslim. And so, of course, Ilhan Omar is going to say that Obama is human and President Trump isn't, because President Trump is a Christian who has a Jewish daughter and Jewish grandchildren. And what does the Quran, Larry, what does the Quran tell Muslims to do to Jews and Christians?
That's right, Laura. And I want to say this, and I know you believe this too, is that there are good people who were born Muslim. The fact that you were born Muslim doesn't make you bad. In fact, I have friends who have renounced being Muslim and they're good people. But if you adhere to fundamentalist Islamic philosophy, by definition, you want to destroy the infidels. And if you don't destroy them, that you put us into slavery to pay high taxes. Okay, we can go back to building the pyramids again. Maybe we can get reparations someday. Who knows? I'm just joking, of course. That's how ridiculous the reparation thing is on the other side of the coin. But you know, we need to start calling a spade in this country, and people are afraid of it. And this, you know, people want to know why I'm always critical of Fox News. You could never say it was forbidden to say that Obama was half Muslim. It was forbidden to say that he worships the Quran, and he did. Okay, he always talked about the Holy Quran, peaceful religion. He opened the door to this. He's the one who allowed all these Somalis to flood into that district in Minnesota that you visited recently, right? Which gave her the constituency to be elected. Now, call that a conspiracy, call what you want, but the ultimate result speaks for itself. And a conspiracy, you know, we're called conspiracy theorists all the time. My client Jerry Corsi is called a conspiracy theorist. Everybody's a conspiracy theorist on the right. Well, conspiracy happens. It's 2 people working together to commit an illegality or a crime. Conspiracies exist. Most people can function with other people. So, hey, I'm a proud conspiracy theorist. I have no problems with that. People used to say, Hillary Clinton used to say there's a great right-wing conspiracy, and my response was, only if we're doing it right, you know?
Now, Laura, there's a number of people who are in the leadership of CARE who have been actually found guilty of, give us some background on these CARE leaders who have been convicted of jihad-related terrorism crimes.
Well, look, there's several of them, and the thing about CARE that people don't really seem to understand is they like to call themselves the leading Muslim civil rights organization in America, but what they really are is an Islamic terrorist organization. And during the Holy Land Foundation terrorism trial, the government, the federal government, was able to produce ample evidence to establish the associations of CARE, ISNA, ICNA, and many other Islamic organizations in America that are affiliated with Ilhan Omar, and many of which have supported her campaign, as being tied to Hamas. All right, and on October 20th, 2010, Judge Jorge Solis, who's out of the U.S. District Court in Northern Texas, in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Texas, found that there was ample evidence tying this group to Hamas. Well, Hamas is a terrorist organization, right? Our State Department recognizes Hamas as a designated Islamic terrorist organization with a stated mission to kill Jewish people. In the Hamas Charter, which is the same as the Muslim Brotherhoods, because the Muslim Brotherhood is Hamas, CARE is Hamas, CARE is Muslim Brotherhood, it calls explicitly for the killing of Jews, and it states that their goal is to destroy Israel and to kill the Jewish people. And so why is it that this organization is being given so much power in America? I mean, for crying out loud, their headquarter office is in D.C., 1 block away from the White House, okay? And yesterday, I believe it was yesterday or 2 days ago, CARE wrote a letter to Fox News calling for Judge Jeanine to be fired, and she might actually be fired. And
Wow.
Fox News bowed down to CARE, even though federal judges has found that they are tied to Hamas and they have supported terrorist organizations. They have had individuals who have worked for them who have been arrested in child sex stings in Florida. One of their directors in Orlando was busted in a child sex ring sting by the FBI. He was on his way, while he was actually busted by the FBI, on his way to go have sex with a 10-year-old.
Damn.
So,
and it's not just Fox News. I mean, that's bad enough, believe me, and that's why what Jason's doing is so important, because we can tell the truth, and there are other organizations out there that are doing the same thing. Pam Geller and others are telling the truth, and you, Laura, on the forefront, and you're risking a lot to do what you do, and you're a very brave, patriotic woman. But one of the things here that really is troubling is the fact that you really can't speak up, and the judges are afraid of this too. I have filed cases against radical black Muslims like Farrakhan in Texas, and the judges run away from these cases. They're frightened of it. Here, Farrakhan, 3 days before, and he's Islamic, 3 days before the massacre in Dallas a few years ago, he was calling to kill white cops in particular. Of course, he was willing to kill African-American cops too, as long as they were cops.
right.
And his disciple is the one who killed the 7 policemen there. And I represent one of the fathers of those fallen policemen, a very fine Latino gentleman, and his son, Patrick Zamarripa. They're scared of this. And even a Trump judge, I'm having to take the matter up on appeal, it was just recently appointed, ran away from this because they're frightened. They're frightened for their lives. And let me point one other thing about Sharia, is that I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Omar took the oath when she became a congresswoman, when she was sworn in on the Quran. The Quran is Sharia, okay? So
Yes.
So Jeanine Pirro didn't say anything that isn't true here. And here's another irony, is that a couple of years ago, I was coming back from Israel, and I was reading a magazine, an Israeli magazine, an English version, and it pointed out how in Israel, they have a dual justice system for the Arabs that live there, under Sharia or under Israeli common law, which is similar to our own common law, more British than ours, but similar. And that in family law proceedings, Arab women would almost overwhelmingly choose Israeli law to decide divorce and custody, then they would choose Sharia law. So it's really interesting that even the Arab population, the Muslim population in Israel, doesn't want to be judged under this very severe, cruel, and inhuman Sharia law, which believes in stoning women, which believes in killing homosexuals, which believes in a lot of things, and you can't talk about that. You can't talk about it on Fox News. And yes, Jeanine Pirro, she's not going to be fired, but her wings are going to be clipped. And they humiliated her for saying something which was simply true.
Now, let's talk about that for a minute, Larry, because Laura's told us a lot about how this explanatory memorandum lays out a multi-step plan. And frankly, congressional representatives being sworn in on the Koran represents at least some of these steps already happening. Laura, there's a lot of people who are going to watch us today, and Larry, this is a question for you as well. A lot of people are going to watch today, and they're going to criticize you guys, and they're going to criticize me for having you on. You've both openly proclaimed that you're Zionists, and there's this big dust-up right now that Ilhan Omar has said that AIPAC is a problem, that Israel controls the United States, Jews have hypnotized people of the United States, and here she is supporting CARE. What really are the differences between, obviously they're on opposite sides of the argument, but how does AIPAC differ from CARE, and what do we say about these statements?
Well, let's again back up a little bit here, and I'll turn it over to Laura. Is that number one, the land of Israel was given to Jews, and by extension Christians. This is the home of Moses, King David, and of course, Jesus. Okay, he walked every day down Mount Olive. First he went to see Mary Magdalene, then he went to see his mother, Mary, and he went to see Peter, who was locked up at the time. This land belongs to Christians and Jews and Christians, however you want to put it, okay? And that is what Zionism is. It's not persecution of Arabs. It's that the land inherently belongs to Jews and by extension.
It's nationalism, and there's nothing wrong with nationalism.
Right. Now, the Arabs and the Muslims, they control every piece of land throughout the Middle East, except for this very small portion called Israel. And, they have Mecca in Saudi Arabia, they have Egypt, they have Libya, they have the Sudan. I mean, they control huge swaths of land, and the Jews can't have one little piece of land. And then the Jews let the Arabs be citizens. They're citizens. They can vote. Jews can't do that. Christians can't do that in these Arabic countries. That's forbidden. And on top of that, the Palestinian population, if you go to Israel, the ones that actually live inside Israel proper, they don't want to leave. They want to stay there because the economy's good. They're making good money. They have a good life. And people don't talk about that. Instead, Israel becomes the newest apartheid state after South Africa. And what is happening in the Democrat Party today, and it's being fomented on college campuses, is a virulent anti-Semitism that goes beyond Ilhan Omar and Congresswoman Tlaib. It infects the entire Democrat Party, and the president's right. And Nancy Pelosi, who may not be an anti-Semite, she has too many Jews in her district to be an anti-Semite, can't control it. It's out of control.
Well, no, I think she could be. She is an anti-Semite. Some of the worst, some of the most anti-Semitic, Jew-hating people I know are people who claim to represent Jews and people who are Jewish themselves. Like, I would say that Chuck Schumer is a vile anti-Semite. I mean, Chuck Schumer claims to be Jewish, but he is not doing any favors to the Jewish people. And unfortunately, AIPAC is allowing him to come back and speak this year. And look, I don't think that it's a crime to criticize AIPAC. I don't like AIPAC, and I'm Jewish. But, you asked what the difference is between, Jews lobbying on behalf of AIPAC and Israel, and then people like Ilhan Omar working with CARE and CARE lobbying. Well, when was the last time a Jew carried out a suicide bombing? Oh, I'm sorry. Was it Jews who flew planes into the World Trade Center on 9/11? No.
Well, many people will say it was, because there's a lot of people who watch YouTube say that Israel was involved in 9/11. And I think there are a number of examples of evidence that 9/11 was a multinational operation that involved operatives from lots of different countries. My personal feeling, setting religion aside, is that Israel is a strategic asset that the United States, the United Kingdom, and allies after World War II put there in the Middle East to control the political situation, to have a democracy that's a United States ally. And certainly, I think you guys raise important points. I mean, AIPAC we've heard for a long time, and social media has become really kind of like the tinderbox for this. We've heard for a long time that that congressional representatives are forced to pledge allegiance to Israel, and I think one of the most terrible people who's been spreading this is, people are going to get mad at me for saying this, but it's Cynthia McKinney, who I find to be a really Jew-hating individual who, with no evidence, has spread this rumor. Let's listen to this for a moment. This is her in her own words.
I did not toe the line on U.S. policy for Israel.
What line is that they wanted? Were you told directly that you had to toe a line, or explain that to me?
Well, every candidate for Congress at that time had a pledge. They were given a pledge to sign. And I was new on the scene. And so the pledge had Jerusalem as the capital city, the military superiority of Israel.
American Congress people have to sign this pledge.
Yes, you sign the pledge. If you don't sign the pledge, you don't get money.
So this is basically something
now,
that
I
is
would point out
mandatory.
that this is an edited interview, and this is Cynthia McKinney's word. I've never heard this stated from anybody other than Cynthia McKinney. Do either of you guys have any knowledge of this alleged Pledge of Allegiance that everybody in Congress is signing? I think this is a lie.
I mean, maybe they're talking about party platforms, but even if there is a Pledge of Allegiance, I don't really see what the problem is. I mean, look, I don't.
Well, we don't want our Congress members pledging allegiance to anything other than the United States. But the point is, she's making vague statements. Sorry, Laura, let me just drop this. She's making vague statements. She's saying you don't get money if you don't sign this pledge. Well, Cynthia McKinney has never explained why she received thousands of dollars on September 11th, 2001 into her campaign. I should have this at the ready, but it's from that terrorist that Lee Stranahan had tracked to the mosque in Virginia. What's the Al-Moody? Al-Moody sent thousands to Cynthia McKinney. So she's apparently getting money from somewhere.
Right. And I just want to be clear. I mean, like, going back to your previous comments, you know, I definitely don't endorse or support any idea that that Israel was involved in 9/11 at all. I think that, you know, that Muslim individuals, Saudi Arabia, they're entirely to blame for 9/11, and that's my viewpoint and my hardline stance on 9/11. But regarding her comments about the PACs and pledging allegiance, there's a difference between pledging allegiance, right, having a loyalty, and pledging allegiance to Israel, which I don't think that U.S. politicians should pledge allegiance to any country besides the United States. But what she seems to, and I don't know, maybe this is what she's referring to, is party platforms, because there's been a lot of discussion lately as to how the Democrats have removed all mentioning of Israel and support for Israel from their party platform, and they refuse to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And this is something that caused a lot of tension, if you recall, at the last Democratic convention, the last DNC convention, because the Democrats refused to say one nation under God, and they also refused to stand in support of Israel. And I don't know if you recall this, but I do remember that during the last DNC convention, this was a very heated issue, and it now is also becoming another topic as discussion around the 2020 DNC convention is also taking place, as it was just announced yesterday that it will be in Wisconsin. But I don't see any problem with our representatives taking a pledge of allegiance to the United States, but also pledging to stand with Israel, which is arguably our strongest ally.
It's not just our strongest ally as well. It is our heritage, okay? It is where Christians and Jews come from. Jesus Christ was a Jewish rabbi, okay? Now, to the extent that everybody believes in Jesus or doesn't believe in Jesus, Israel is inextricably tied to this country, because we are a country as one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our God emanated from the Holy Land. So it's not a question of pledging allegiance to Israel. We're pledging allegiance to our God. And that's in the Constitution. It's in the Declaration of Independence. It explains why evangelical Christians are bigger supporters of Israel, and frankly, most American Jews are, I might say, regrettably. Now, with regard to AIPAC, Jews learned over time that they weren't liked. They learned that the persecution could only stop if they lined the pockets of politicians. And that's, in fact, what they do. So you have groups like AIPAC, and you have groups like the Republican Jewish Coalition, which calls me all the time asking me for money. I was a member at one time. I quit because I don't like the president, Matt Brooks. I don't like lobbyists. Yeah. And I'll give my money to another source. I'll give it to myself to fight for Israel, in effect. But what they're doing historically is that Jews understand. And I remember going to, it was in the convention before the last one in Tampa, Florida, the Republican convention. There was a event, the Republican Jewish Coalition. You had all the politicians there, including Nikki Haley, who later became UN ambassador. You had others, the governor of Virginia, who was indicted ultimately, but the indictment and the conviction was thrown out ultimately. They were all there bowing down. You had Sheldon Adelson, the owner of the Venetian Empire, who years ago misappropriated the Freedom Watch trademark. I had to sue him over that. Sitting there like a mafia don. And all these politicians would get up and say how much they supported Israel because they wanted the money. They wanted the support. Most of them probably could have cared less about Israel. But the American Jewish community learned that our protection was regrettably, and it doesn't mean that it's right, but it was to line the pockets of these politicians. And that's true. And, at least it's money. It's not threatening people's lives. And that's the difference between AIPAC and these terrorist-linked groups, is that we don't threaten anybody's lives, okay? We're just practicing money talks and nobody walks. And that's out of self-preservation. Maybe if the Jews of Germany had lined Hitler's pockets, there wouldn't be 6 million dead right now. So I want people to understand that straight up. And after I did your last show, Jason, I got a email from a left-leaning Jewish fellow. His last name was Brooks, not Matt Brooks. I sent you some of them just so you could be amused. Yeah. And this guy, self-hating Jew, trashing Israel, pretending that his allegiance is the United States and that he has no allegiance to anything Jewish or Israeli or Christian for that matter. He is what Laura's talking about, because yes, the biggest threat to the Jewish people is the Jewish left.
Yeah.
I mean, we can get it in the front from radical Muslims. They'll stick the knife in the front.
And President Trump tweeted about it today. They talked about it on Fox and Friends. Yeah,
but Jews and Christians are getting the knife in the back from the Jewish left. And I can talk about it because I'm Jewish, but you know what? Nobody who's not Jewish will talk about this because then I'll be called an anti-Semite.
A big part of my concern, guys, is that Ilhan Omar is essentially getting exactly what she wants. She's sort of stirring this bucket, and it's Jews versus Muslims. It's people who dislike Israel versus people who like Israel. It's people who recognize the need to have a democratic ally in the middle of all of these, religious caliphate dictator kingdoms in the middle of the Middle East, where, like it or not, the United States economy is based on the worldwide demand for oil, and the United States wants to have a political, a military, a strategic lever in the region to control power and wealth around the world. I'm really just very concerned about Cynthia McKinney and her lack of transparency and her lack of honesty in sharing information about all of these people who have contributed to her campaign. And look at the dates here, guys. 9/11, 2001, all of these, people can look this up, the Federal Election Committee.
Jason, you said it came from a guy in Virginia. Well, that's where the explanatory memorandum came from. I'm telling you, it all goes back to Virginia. And Virginia is really, along with Minnesota, ground zero for where all this Islamification is taking place, because they just elected 2 days ago. I don't know if you saw this. About 2 days ago, they just elected a jihadi individual who on his own social media has expressed a liking for individuals who have called for the killing of Jews. So once again, and there's a mega $1 million mosque that's being constructed in Virginia at the moment as well. The whole place is being overrun by Sharia advocates and Muslim Brotherhood fanboys and fangirls, and it's very dangerous.
Let's talk about the likes of Cynthia McKinney too. This is a really sad commentary on the way things have evolved over the years. The biggest white group that was supportive of the civil rights movement was the Jewish people. Okay, they put their neck on the line. Okay, they marched with Martin Luther King. They were very much pro-civil rights. But over time, there were radicals in the black movement that had to find a scapegoat, much like Hitler found a scapegoat. But of course, they didn't commit genocide, Holocaust. But Jews became the whipping boys for this radical black movement, like the separatist movement of Louis Farrakhan and Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. He referred to Jaimes in New York City derisively.
Right.
And there is a large minority strain in the African American community, which is vehemently anti-Semitic. And that's a reality, and we have to face up to that. And Farrakhan is at the head of the pack. And talk about, what Omar said, that Trump isn't human. Well, Farrakhan says Jews aren't human. Okay, it's a gutter religion. They're termites, all over the world. You know what? And he's revered. Obama showed up and took a picture with him years ago. Obama is an anti-Semite. Let's say it straight up. But when I said that, when I did an event on the Mall years ago, and I said, Mr. President, be the president for all people. Get up off your knees, put the Quran down, and come out with your hands up. MSNBC had a field day. They declared me the leader of the Tea Party movement. Sitting there with...
But Larry, the thing is you just said it, right? The thing is this isn't a surprise to people. And what do Obama, what do Rashida, what does Ilhan, what do Louis Farrakhan, and all these people, the people who committed 9/11, what do they all have in common? I mean, it's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. What do these people all have in common?
They hate Jews.
Yeah, They're all Muslim. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what people say, right? Anybody who calls themselves a Muslim in the theological sense, in the ideological sense, anybody who identifies as a Muslim holds these beliefs, because it is a punishable offense in Islam to try to reform Islam or change the word of Muhammad or try to reform Islam. Okay, and so when the Quran calls for the killing of Jews and Christians, right, that's what it means to be a good Muslim. That's what it means to be a good Muslim in Islam, okay? That's what it means to be a good Muslim. And so when Fox News decides to admit this truth and stop censoring people like Judge Jeanine for saying things like this, when people stop censoring and banning people like myself and others who expose this on social media, then maybe we can save ourselves from being conquered, right? Maybe we can save ourselves from submitting to an Islamic caliphate and the imposition of Sharia law in the Western civilized world. But until then, it's just a very dire situation for America and like I said, the Western civilized world, because these are all facts. This is all factual information that is in the Quran, right? It's not hateful to say this. If it's so hateful, then maybe we should have an honest discussion about Islam in America, right? If it's so hateful to say these things, well, then maybe we should look at the source. The source is the Quran. I'm not the one saying we should go kill Jews and Christians. I'm just reading from the Quran. And
Laura,
so
let's
people
talk
are
for a
so
minute.
triggered by this. Let's have a conversation.
Let's talk for a minute about the censorship.
I just want to emphasize, I'm not trying to sugarcoat this or be politically correct.
Sure.
But a child that's born Muslim is not inherently a bad person, okay?
Oh, I don't think so.
If you practice.
People can renounce.
Yeah, they can renounce, and I have several friends and colleagues that have renounced. And they said, I don't want to be part of it. I don't want to be part of it. I've represented people from Iran and elsewhere, and they say, I quit. I'm not going to be this anymore, because they understand that this so-called religion, which is not a religion at all, it's a cult. It's a political cult.
Yeah.
Is very destructive, not just of Jews and Christians, but destructive of their own people. And the irony here is that Ilhan Omar, at least as it stands right now, has done us all a big favor, because now she's exposed what this is all about, and now she and others have infiltrated our Congress, and we can see it up close and personal what it is we have to deal with.
And I agree with you. And I just want to be very clear too. You know, some of my closest friends are people who used to be Muslim and they no longer are Muslim. People who have denounced their Islamic upbringing, and they are now, some of them have converted. Some of them are now Christians. Some of them are now very favorable of Judaism. And I don't think that people who are born Muslim are bad people. I feel a lot of pity for a lot of people who call themselves Muslim, because a lot of people who call themselves Muslim only do so because they're forced to do so. There's a lot of people who are living in places like Iran, which is an Islamic theocracy, and they are forced into it. They do not have a choice. And there's a lot of women who private message me, and they would message me on Twitter before I was banned, and they would tell me about how they're being abused by their family members and how, you know, their fathers would rape them and how they're trying to leave. And I feel a lot of pity for these people. Not everybody who's a Muslim wants to be a Muslim, and a lot of people are forced into it. And so for people who say I hate Muslim people, that's not true. I hate Islam as an ideology because of the millions of human rights violations it's responsible for, the millions of deaths it's responsible for, and just the absolute human suffering and torture that it's implementing all throughout the world on innocent people who just want nothing more than to break free.
Guys,
Yeah.
let me bring you to this for a second. I want to talk about the effect that it's having on social media. And of course, Laura, everybody now knows you've been banned permanently from Twitter. Louis Farrakhan put up a video saying, "I'm not an anti-Semite, I'm anti-termite." You, Laura, merely pointed out what seems to be coming to the fore in the mainstream today and this week. You pointed it out and they kicked you off of Twitter. Is anybody talking about the fact that Twitter, there's more stock in Twitter owned by Al-Walid bin Talal, the Saudi royal who is a Wahhabi, huge supporter of Sharia law and Islam. He owns more of Twitter than Jack Dorsey. What can we say about that?
Well, look, I mean, this is the reason why people are getting notifications on social media, people like myself and Pamela Geller and Michelle Malkin, that we're in violation of Pakistani Sharia law and that we need to seek a legal counsel. I mean, it's really concerning. And when you have this much Islamic influence, well, there's no surprise as to why these tech companies are banning people who post facts about Islam. It's no surprise that you can call for the killing of Jews and Christians. Literally, Twitter allowed for #KillAllJews to trend on Twitter, and that was okay. But me pointing out facts about Sharia law is a bannable offense, right? Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood all have verified social media accounts on Facebook and Twitter, but God forbid, an outspoken Jewish journalist has access to social media, right? I mean, it's really insane. And now you have companies like Google and Apple allowing for pro-Sharia apps to populate their app store. There's an app called AbShare, which is a wife tracking app in Saudi Arabia, which allows men to track their wives and daughters who are trying to flee the country, because Saudi Arabia has an issue with women trying to flee the country and run away because so many women are abused under Islamic Sharia law.
Hey, Laura, let me give a little soundbite here that I'm sure Right Wing Watch will pick up on. Is that, hey, we're not anti-Muslim, we love hummus, it's great. Let them deal with that. But let me give a little history course quickly, Jason. Okay, people don't know this, and they don't teach this in our universities. They just say that the Jews took the land away from the Arabs and the Muslims. But Israel was created in 1948. And at the time it was created, it was a checkerboard. There was a Palestinian sector, to use the term Palestinian loosely, because anybody that lived in Israel was called a Palestinian, including Jews. But there were sectors for Arabs and there were sectors for Jews. The Arabs couldn't wait. They declared war on the Jews immediately. They tried to annihilate them, kill them all. And by the grace of Yahweh, we prevailed. Okay, you lose a war, there's a consequence to it. And the Arabs have lost 3 or 4 major wars since then. But rather than taking in the Palestinians, who some of them fled at that point, the Arab countries put them in ghettos and let them rot. Okay, like African Americans have been allowed to rot in the North. I've always said the South is actually less racist than the North. And that's what the Arabs did. But that's not taught in the schools. And it's not known as well that in 1949, the UN also created a Palestinian country, a Palestinian state called Pakistan. So the Muslims have their own country. It's called Pakistan. They don't like it in Israel, buy a train ticket and go to Pakistan. Or go to Jordan, where you have 70% of the population Palestinian, ruled over by Bedouins, in a monarchy. That can be the Palestinian homeland. You don't have to take up the West Bank. You've got it. And as far as the Temple Mount is concerned, Mecca is the center of the Muslim world, not Jerusalem. And God, the Jewish Christian God, gave Jerusalem and Israel to the Jewish people. It's a very small part of land, and it just because there's I don't know what you would call it, just a desire of Arabs and Muslims to annihilate the Jewish people, that this thing will continue on forever. And I, for one, and I'll say this, I'm not in favor of a two-state solution. If they don't like it, go to Pakistan. If they don't like it, go to Jordan. If they don't like it, go somewhere else, because they're entitled to live in peace in the Jewish homeland, and they're entitled to vote, and they're entitled to be citizens. I don't agree with what Netanyahu said recently either. They are entitled to be citizens. They have rights. So, I'm sure this entire interview will be taken out of context by the lunatic left, but it's time that people were taught, particularly in our schools, our millennials, and I might add my dog has a larger vocabulary than most millennials. They need to be able to understand what really went on.
Now, I don't know if you guys can see this image, but I'm sharing right here an image of Linda Sarsour and Rashida Tlaib holding up a map. They're smiling, they're laughing. They've got a Post-it note that shows Palestine in place of Israel. Laura, Linda Sarsour is not in Congress, is she? What is she doing there with this kind of...
Linda Sarsour campaigned with Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, something I pointed out when I did my investigation on the ground in both Michigan and Minnesota over a year ago. Mm-hmm. And Linda Sarsour is a jihadist. I mean, this is a woman who called for jihad, right? That's Islamic terrorism against President Trump. Why is this woman even allowed in our congressional buildings?
Yeah.
Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar invited Linda Sarsour as their special guest for the congressional swearing-in ceremony. It was Linda Sarsour who was patrolling the hallways with these Muslim thugs from CARE, a designated Islamic terrorist organization, the other day, when they were blocking former Muslim reporters. These are women who decided to leave Islam. They are former Muslim women, and they blocked them with their physical bodies. They had these Muslim men blocking these short, tiny former Muslim reporters from entering Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar's office to ask them about their anti-Semitism. I mean, these people, they are bullies, they behave like thugs, and they are criminals. And the fact that Linda Sarsour is allowed to enter Congress freely without any condemnation from the Democrat Party, when the Women's March founder called for Sarsour to step down from the Women's March because of her vile anti-Semitism and blatant Jew hatred, I mean, it's just disgusting. President Trump is right, like today, when he said that the Democrat Party truly is the anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic party. They truly are. And it's just disgusting to me that people like Linda Sarsour are able to operate freely in America. I mean, unfortunately, this woman is a United States citizen. But my God, I mean, her actions and her statements are grounds for treason. And, if it were up to me, if I was president of the United States, well, Linda Sarsour would be arrested and tried for treason.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, President Trump has no control over his Justice Department. They're going after him.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's another story. Now, we can maybe segue into, I don't know.
Sure. Let's talk about that, Larry. There's a lot going on. We've had Nancy Pelosi say she's no longer interested in pursuing impeachment of President Trump because it's not worth it. Is this just some sort of a play for Nancy Pelosi to step aside while Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Ilhan Omar pick up the mantle of anti-Trump thumping, and then perhaps Nancy comes back later?
It's real simple, Jason. As Woody Allen said, it's a travesty of a mockery of a sham of a travesty. It's a joke. It's a fraud. What Nancy Pelosi is doing, no one says she isn't smart, and even Adam Schiff, okay? They're both very smart, evil but smart, is she's teeing it up for Robert Mueller. She's saying, come forward with some really strong proof to cover for me politically, because yes, we do want to proceed with impeachment. We do want to have a knife at the president's throat, figuratively speaking, perhaps even actually, and we're going to rough him up. And when the Democrats say that impeachment will be counterproductive, and when the Republicans say that too, it's not true. It was impeachment during the Clinton years, and I know because I introduced articles of impeachment against Bill Clinton through my friend Bob Barr and others in the conservative movement. This weakened Clinton to the point, and it weakened the Democrats to the point. We didn't do it for that reason. I didn't do it for that reason. But that's what gave rise to electing this idiot, George W. Bush, who nearly destroyed the country in the next 8 years. So it did have an impact. It defeated Al Gore in many ways because there was such an odor, there was such a stench that the country went in favor of someone who really wasn't qualified to be president.
And isn't that what they're trying to do, Larry? Just have Trump embroiled in an impeachment stench so that the news is all about his impeachment while the 2020 campaign and election are going on? Isn't that the sinister plot that Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi are cooking up?
It's not counterproductive. It's tried and true. That's how we got George W. Bush. I didn't do it for that reason. Neither did Bob Barr, who introduced the articles of impeachment. We did it because it was just.
And it's important that we remind everyone we're talking about Bob Barr, not William Barr. Totally different guy, not the current Attorney General.
Right. Bob Barr is a very fine person. He was congressman from Georgia, former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. I worked with him at Judicial Watch, and we furthered the impeachment of Bill Clinton in Congress. Unfortunately, not for enough. It was over Lewinsky because we wanted to broaden it to Chinagate, Travelgate, misuse of the IRS, trashing women.
Things there were actually evidence of. We've seen, we're coming up on 2 years of Robert Mueller investigating President Trump, and so far he's just gotten people to be indicted for process crimes and financial crimes they did before they worked for Trump.
Well, mark my words, this impeachment report, it's a Freudian slip. This report that's going to come up from Mueller, which will take a while to be released, will have enough for impeachment. You don't have to commit a crime to be impeached. High crimes and misdemeanors. It doesn't have to rise to the level of a crime. It can be moral turpitude. It can be all kinds of things. And it's going to be loaded with stuff like that.
Right. So, Larry, you and Laura have a case brewing against Twitter. I'm sure most people have seen this clip from, I guess it was last week or something like that. I don't know who the hell is at my door, but they're not coming in because they weren't announced. But this was the Joe Rogan show with Jack Dorsey and someone from Twitter talking about Laura.
Jason, let us know if it's people
or their race or their gender, their sexual orientation, their gender identity. So it was something that's broad-based, is that you can't choose to attack people because of these characteristics.
But you do have limits on what characteristics you police, right? So you're not banning people for targeted trans-speciesing others, right?
Well, we have also general abuse and harassment rules, right? Which says you can't engage in abuse and harassment on the platform.
But you can't detonate someone, but you can call them stupid.
Generally, I mean, if you create
Sorry, guys, I just sort of put that up. I don't know, somebody ordered food that accidentally got delivered to my apartment.
Is this a clip where she's talking about me?
I think it might not have been, Laura. Sorry, I launched that thing not fully ready because that doorbell surprised me. But the point is, Jack Dorsey is talking about you here, Laura. He's being held to task by Tim Pool, who I think did a good job of asking some tough questions that they didn't want to answer. Laura, why has Twitter refused to reinstate you when Louis Farrakhan is on there saying he's anti-termite, and it now turns out that
they're biased. They're biased against conservatives, and they're run by Muslims. I mean, at the end of the day, if you just have to look at the money. You follow the money. And the fact of the matter is that the Saudi prince, Al-Walid bin Talal, owns more Twitter stock than Jack Dorsey. And when you have a Wahhabist individual who hates President Trump and believes in imposing Sharia law, who owns more Twitter stock, has more power over Twitter than the CEO himself, well, of course they're going to ban people like me because I'm exposing the Islamification. Right. I'm exposing the spread of Sharia.
It's not just Twitter. Last time I checked, Saudi Arabia owns 70% of Fox. 20th Century Fox. I don't know if it's still the case, but it may explain why you can't use the word Muslim on Fox.
Well, Larry, this is a huge problem, right? I mean, Bill Binney has told us in other interviews that one of the biggest problems he observed while he was at NSA during his 30-plus year-long tenure there was that so much of this work that we expect to be done by the government and our military and agencies of the government is being outsourced to corporations. So if you're outsourcing government work to a corporation, it seems to me all you need to do to overthrow the government is buy those corporations. And so we see these companies like Kingdom Holdings owning the top 4 floors of the Mandalay Bay, and yet this investigation into the Las Vegas shooting, anytime anybody mentions anything about Saudi Arabia or helicopters, we have disinformation agents like Jake Morphonios making up fake evidence to dissuade people from investigating anything to do with Saudi Arabia.
Look, it was our moronic president, George W. Bush, who flew the Saudis out of town, got them out of Dodge right after 9/11. Saudi royal family took them back, protected them. They're benefactors. You know, the Daddy Bush, was with the Carlyle Group. They took $1 billion from the bin Laden family. You know, they have bought the politicians in this country. So can you blame then AIPAC for trying to level the playing field? I don't, care for lobbyists myself. Matt Brooks of the Republican Jewish Coalition is a lobbyist. I don't care for it at all. But
it should be illegal, shouldn't it? Lobbying, it seems like they're just buying politicians.
Well, they do buy politicians. It's a tradition that came from Great Britain. They perfected it, and we took it to another level.
And have people been made aware of this photo? I've shown it a number of times, but this is Al-Walid bin Talal seated in his office with Jamal Khashoggi, who was famously brutally murdered at the Saudi Arabian embassy. But yet the mainstream news throughout the United States, including the Washington Post, for which Khashoggi was allegedly a journalist, they've made this out to be some, travesty where, Julian Assange has been locked in the Ecuadorian embassy for 7 years. This guy, Khashoggi, seems like he was a jihadi. He's shown with members of the, who are those guys in Afghanistan?
Well, Jason, there's one thing that the Arabs are good at, and that's killing each other. Okay, Shiites and Sunnis, they hate each other. I mean, they hate Jews and Christians more, but they're a close second when it comes to hating each other. So it's no surprise that Khashoggi was assassinated by probably the prince.
Well, I mean, the other thing is he was photographed in the 1980s with a bunch of mujahideen jihadis, and he's holding a shoulder-fired missile. So he's not. I mean, Laura, you're a pretty bold journalist, but if somebody gave you a Soviet-era, rocket launcher, would you hold that, or would you just stand next to it? It seems like this guy's involved with the mujahideen.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't really care about the fact that that Khashoggi was murdered. I mean, you're going to live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. And as it came out after the fact, right, it may sound kind of cold-hearted to say, but Jamal Khashoggi was a Muslim Brotherhood operative, all right? He was writing pro-Muslim Brotherhood propaganda for the Washington Post, which upon further investigation, it turns out that the Washington Post allowed for several members of terrorist organizations to write op-eds on their platform. And so I don't really feel sympathy for him. I mean, these jihadis are a dime a dozen, and if they're going to, they may have differences in terms of which sect they promote, or they may have differences in which terrorist organization they advocate for or belong for, right? But at the end of the day, their ideology is the same, and so I don't really view the death of Jamal Khashoggi as a loss. I don't really view it.
Laura's right. The Saudis, basically to avoid being beheaded, the royal family, they line the pockets of these terrorist groups, but they fear these terrorist groups at the same time. So the irony is they're bribing the terrorist groups not to lop their heads off because they are rivals. The Sunni, they're Sunnis, the Saudis, and the Shiites want to destroy them.
Right.
So.
Right, but they're one and the same. I mean, it's the same ideology. At the end of the day, I mean, they may have different sects or they may have differences in the way that they carry out their business, but the ideology is still the same. I mean, there's only one form of Islam. There's only one Quran.
Yeah, they're competing for followers. You know, that's
right.
the bottom line.
But I have a serious problem with people trying to portray Jamal Khashoggi as a victim, because he's not a victim. He was producing pro-Muslim Brotherhood propaganda, and I don't really view his death as a loss for the field of journalism or a loss for the American people. I think that Jamal Khashoggi was an enemy of the state. I don't think that I don't really think that it's appropriate for American media institutions to be trying to generate
treat him
sympathy.
like some kind of hero or something like that. Yeah,
he's not a hero. Like Time Magazine put him on the front page and, tried to make this guy a martyr for journalism.
Wow.
For what? For what?
Yeah. Now, Laura, you've relied on really hard evidence to back up your reports. You are on the ground, you're finding ballot boxes in rental cars, you're finding valet receipts that are totally blowing Joe Lombardo's narrative out of the water. You did a ton of hard-hitting work on Las Vegas. What do you think would motivate someone to manufacture fake evidence, as Jake Morphonios did in an interview with myself and John Cullen, to try to convince everyone that he's spoken with the Saudi Arabian embassy? There was no Saudi Arabian involvement in Las Vegas. You very early on had caught on that item that ISIS took credit for what went on in Las Vegas. Why would a so-called journalist such as Jake Morphonios make up false evidence to try to stop people from looking at what I was discussing with John Cullen?
Well, I don't know, but I don't really follow him that much. But, from the interactions that I have had with Jake, they haven't exactly been very pleasant. I find his rhetoric to be very anti-Semitic. He's very anti-Israel. And I just... I told you when we were on the ground in Las Vegas together, when he showed up, I believe, to one of your live shoots there, that I didn't want to associate with him or his content. And so I don't really have a content on it. I mean, to just be pretty blunt, I don't really have any respect for his work.
Well put. Well, so are there any developments we can discuss, Larry, with regard specifically to this matter of Laura and Twitter? I mean, it seems to me Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, they all hide behind this Decency and Communications Act and Section 230 of that protects them and allows them to decide that Laura cannot be on while Louis Farrakhan can. Is there anything that's going to happen there? What can we hope for?
We're in the courts, and I tried to get around that act. Years ago, I sued Facebook because they, in effect, were promoting the third Intifada, killing of Jews and Christians. They left a page up that was put up by the radical Palestinians, or should I just say the Palestinians. They left it up for 2 to 3 weeks. Even Prime Minister Netanyahu begged them to take it down. I sued. Are there any developments we can discuss? Whoops. Yeah. So the case that we brought that Laura is a part of is actually an antitrust case. What we're saying is it's a restraint of trade because they're acting in parallel to discriminate against conservatives and libertarians and people of faith and others that they don't agree with politically. And that actually is anti-competitive. It actually doesn't make any sense to do that, but it's harming competition. That's in the courts right now, and you can see our pleadings at freedomwatchusa.org on that. And, we're bringing other cases. I have a leftist media strike force where so far I've sued nearly everybody. There's a few more to add to the list. I'm at stay tuned. I think the Daily Beast is going to get sued tomorrow. They published something defamatory about me yesterday, claiming I was anti-Me Too. I was simply criticizing Tucker Carlson, who made some incredibly stupid remarks about women on TV.
But who cares, even if you are anti-Me Too? I mean, I'm anti-Me Too. It's just a total bullshit movement, and it lost all credibility when those women decided to falsely accuse Brett Kavanaugh of rape so that they could
the point I was making, Laura, is there are legitimate elements of it, but the elements in Hollywood have gone off the rails. It's become a jihad in and of itself. But yes, there are legitimate cases where women have been sexually harassed, and there needs to be remedies for that. I don't care if you call it Me Too or I Too or whatever, is that it is a legitimate thing.
It is legitimate, but it's only legitimate in the moment if you report it in the moment. It's not legitimate if you get on your knees and suck dick to get a position in Hollywood and then report it 30 years down the line when you fall out of contact or you have some type of negative interaction with a man or don't get the promotion you want. And unfortunately,
it's also stupid. Look, Tucker Carlson, let me just give you a history about Tucker Carlson. He's a phony, number one, is that I remember way back when, one of the first interviews that was done with me, a profile, he was writing for Time Magazine. It was a hit piece. I was running Judicial Watch. Then he used to host Crossfire from time to time. He criticized me for suing the Clintons. The guy's not really a conservative. So it is legitimate to criticize him for using the C word with regard to women publicly on radio, trying to suck up to Don Imus's shock jock. So whether you're pro Me Too or anti Me Too, Tucker Carlson is not a good example of who to hold out as someone who has a lot of integrity. He doesn't, and not coincidentally, he's on Fox News.
Well, listen, guys, we're just about out of time for today. I'd love to have you both back on. There's so much more for us to discuss, and everyone is really closely watching this matter with Laura versus Twitter. Laura, I really think they should reinstate you, and we've got a ton of video from Laura's site that we haven't had a chance to look at just yet. I do want to encourage people to go over on YouTube, of course, and subscribe to Laura Loomer. It's one of the few remaining platforms that she hasn't been banned from, so people can follow Laura on YouTube. People should also be following Laura daily on lauraloomer.us. She's been banned from PayPal, she's been banned from Uber, from Lyft, from Uber Eats, from Medium. Chase took away her bank account. It's a lot of crazy stuff going on with Laura. So please get on to lauraloomer.us and help keep Laura's incredibly hard-hitting journalism alive. People can also support Larry and his team at Freedom Watch by going to freedomwatchusa.org. Larry is bringing these hard-hitting cases that really our Justice Department should be, but they're failing to. So I hope that people will support my guests. I want to thank both Laura and Larry for joining me tonight. I'm sorry to cut it short, guys, but in just 23 minutes, I'm going to be going live on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and patreon.com/truepundit with Michael Moore for another episode of More Pain. I'll have you both back really soon. Thanks so much, and have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.